Hello everyone, Bill Parish here from GTT Audio. We're back with Laurence Dickie, and now we have Grover Neville of Indulger joining us. Welcome, Grover.
Thank you for having me, Bill. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We've had just an absolute blast with you here, really getting to know you. You've turned us on to such great music.
Opened our ears.
Yes, you opened our ears. I mean,
That's
it was
very kind. Thank you.
just the presentation of music that you put on this morning was mind-bending.
You guys are super kind for letting me DJ and talk your ears off a little bit. So I do appreciate it. You've been a wonderful host, and it's been really nice to meet you for the very first time. I've really always appreciated your speakers. Like the Nautilus captured my imagination I think I was like 14 when I saw it. And I was like, what is that? I want to know what that is. That's cool. You know, I've always had an appreciation for the design, but also, you know, I got the sense that it was something different. And I think my impression after reviewing a pair of the Gias really, and hearing, you know, Bill's setups at several shows is like, these are different than a lot of things that are on the market in a really good way, I think.
Thank you.
So thank you for having me, and thank you for
Absolutely, it's
being
our
such a wonderful
pleasure.
host. So we were just talking a little bit about the Moya, actually, which is the new flagship, and some recordings we listened to. The Theofanidis, the piece is called Rainbow Body by Christopher Theofanidis, and it was inspired by Hildegard von Bingen, who was I believe, 12 or 1300s medieval nun, essentially, who had these visions from God and wrote this music as a sort of translation of what she felt she saw and heard. And it's beautiful, kind of haunting music. And Theofanidis
It was beautiful.
took that, the Bingen, and kind of recrafted it in his own imagination, and kind of correlated it with sounds that he had heard in East Asia, and texts that had inspired him from Buddhism, from Buddhist monks who had visions of divinity as well. It's a very interesting piece. It's about 13 minutes long. I first was introduced to it when I played in youth orchestra as a high schooler. And we actually played the Bingen. We played an arrangement of the Hildegard von Bingen piece, which is the Ave Maria.
Right.
And then we also played the Theofanidis. And so I can't claim that all the scholarship that I was sharing with you was my own. I learned that from my youth orchestra director, who was wonderful.
Well, you passed it on, and we appreciated that.
Yes. No, but it was wonderful. And like you said, Laurence, it was like I heard things in that recording that I hadn't heard before. And it's Robert Spano and the Atlanta Symphony, which has good recordings, but I'm thinking I maybe need to go back and revisit some of their recordings because the dynamics and the texture and purity in the mid-range were astonishing.
It was just a 1644 Cobuzz stream. Of course, it was getting upsampled the double DSD through the NADAC, but it was... Well, Joe Cabala turned around, and he and I at the same time just went like stuck our hands out how large it was. It was. I mean, the speakers disappeared. It was floor to ceiling, wall to wall.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was so texturally dense, and we could still pick out the various elements and what each one was actually doing.
And that piece goes from very small. The very beginning is literally just the first cello playing that little motif that goes all the way. It starts very low and then shoots up really high. Just that solo cello all the way to full orchestra with bass drum, with cymbal crashes, with full brass section. I mean, the dynamics were incredible. And one thing that even a lot of really large speakers sometimes can struggle with is that when the full orchestra plays, the sense of width of, you're going from the first chairs in a tight sort of half circle around the director to the whole orchestra playing, you really got that sense of it expanding, and it went beyond the walls of the room, kind of that lovely illusion, just expanding. It was so wide and still so centered. The center image was still super stable. And
I am going to link down below in the description this album, because I know a lot of you will be wanting to email me asking about it. So just look below; it'll be down there in the description.
There's some great stuff on it as well. I think there's a Jennifer Higdon piece they play on it, and also Samuel Barber. I think either his first or third symphony maybe is on it, which are also wonderful pieces.
Barber's great.
Yeah, there's some really good stuff on it. We played a lot of classical this visit, but we also played a lot of other stuff. It was cool to, kind of go through a little exploration of what things have been influenced. And I've mostly just been super impressed by how that system handles everything from intimate to enormous to acoustic to, Ewald played Nicki Minaj and 90s R&B.
Oh, he did. I'm glad I was out of there at that time. I don't know where I was, but I'm glad I missed that demo.
I'm sure he watched you going up the stairs and said, right.
Exactly. He knows I don't want that. It devalues the property.
It sounds
stanky.
It's amazing.
But those speakers and that system, they can do everything. And that's, I think, though, that is a lot of the feedback that I've received on these speakers is everyone sort of expects them to play big, even though I don't know if they expect them to unravel everything the way it does in a symphony, but what it does on the solo pieces and the soft passages is also just, that's even more mind-bending to me than the big stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question, Laurence. What is your favorite part of your job? What's the thing you have the most fun with?
It's actually bringing enjoyment to other people, funnily enough. And all of this is actually what it's about. I don't lose sight of the fact that, I use the analogy so many times, our job is to provide a window onto the art. And to have you guys appreciating the art is really the ultimate goal. So, these last couple of days have been an enlightenment because of the education you've given me. Some music that I'd never come across. But just understanding, remembering that there are people like you who really are using the equipment for its proper purpose, appreciating the art. Yeah, but from an engineering perspective, I enjoy it all, actually. As I've said a few times over the course of these 2 days, I've really enjoyed doing the crossover because it was actually the biggest challenge, funnily enough. There were some developments. I do actually enjoy doing the computer-aided design, something I, in a way, was forced to get into with Vivid Audio because we're a small company. That's the thing about small companies, you end up having to do many tasks. And suddenly I was charged with doing the 3D design, the CAD, and I do really enjoy doing that. The industrial design of Moya and our last series, the Kaya, was actually done by a chap called Matt Longbottom, and he provides us with the external surface, the external appearance of the loudspeaker, but I'm responsible for giving it substance and fleshing it out. And then we have another guy in Durban these days who then takes it from those 3D drawings into actual tooling and parts. Taking ideas and turning them into material objects, the whole process has always intrigued me. It's all good fun.
Yeah, it's an international team, which I think is really interesting, right? You're scattered all over. But I think there's also something that's that must be kind of a challenging task sometimes because some of the shapes and how to cut things up and having, a relatively small team to do what is a relatively complex task is I don't know, I think it's pretty impressive.
Well, obviously, thank goodness for the internet. But I still go to Durban every 3 months for a couple of weeks or thereabouts, because in the end there are some things where you just have to be able to point and tell. One of the oft-repeated statements when people first cast their eyes on an actual Vivid Audio loudspeaker is, oh, it looks different when you actually see it in the flesh. So, and so it is with the finished product. It is also with the steps along the way. So there are times when you finally you see the thing that you've been dealing with on the screen, and I go to Durban, and my colleague Joe shows me where he's got to, and I go, oh, right. Oh, I can see now why it doesn't quite fit. That sort of thing. It is important to still face-to-face and see what's going on.
One of my favorite memories, you kind of touched on this a little bit, was walking at one point into the sound room, and there was maybe only one person, or maybe it was just you who was in there, and someone had left the iPad playing with a couple of things, and you were sitting at your computer, and you had some 3D models or CAD or something up, and you were like finger drumming along to a solo, it's a piano solo in some, it was Bruce Hornsby or something like that, or Lucinda Williams or something, and you were just working on your CAD and finger drumming along to the music, and I was like, this is a human in their most prized element, like having fun and creating. He has
this addictive enthusiasm
Yes.
that
very
no
infectious.
other designer I've seen have. He just, absolutely. I mean, it's you act, and it's not an act, but your personality. I can't see you any other way. I can imagine you being this enthusiastic about it from the first day that you started it, back when you were working with B&W.
Yeah, absolutely.
And here you are today after all these years, and you're still just so excited about it.
Still enjoying it.
Yeah.
It's nice to see people who have fun. I mean,
Yes,
that's what hi-fi is about.
I was extremely lucky to have that position at B&W where they respected the importance of allowing their Blue Skies researcher, myself, to play, frankly, because it kind of is play. Well, you're literally sometimes messing around going, oh, I wonder what would happen if. Actually, that is the most crucial thing. I wonder what would happen if. That, and I'm sure it applies to all sorts of creative task, asking that question. That's all very well and good, but and B&W absolutely gave me that freedom, and of course I have that total freedom now. Yeah,
I think the joy comes through in the product, like you said, when you see it in person. Sometimes I think a product on a brochure sheet can look wonderful and polished and all of these things, but when you see it in person, you really realize in the details of the person who created it, their personality comes through. So, and I think that sense of joy and fun comes through.
Yeah.
I have a question, though. What's the most challenging part of your job?
I already alluded to it. On this particular occasion with Moya, it was the 5-way crossover. When we were first considering the product, and at first it was going to be more or less a doubling from the G1S, the previous largest Vivid Audio product. But as the thing evolved, it became a 4-fold increase. And as I started to consider the implications of the size of the loudspeaker, realizing that it was going to have to be a 5-way, that a 4-way really wasn't going to be good enough. At the same time, I was thinking, this crossover is going to be a pile of fun to design. So in the end, because I have to say, there's little point in designing the crossover until the loudspeaker is really pretty much finished, because it is the thing which ties all the bits together. Anything you change in the physical shape is going to have an effect on the response of the drivers, and therefore you're going to have to tweak the crossover. So really, it's the last thing you do. And so back in January this year, I spent 4 weeks on this thing, and it was challenging. But, it brings the satisfaction of having overcome the challenge when you finally reach that point. And I have to say, I'm pretty chuffed with the way that it went in the end.
What was the impetus behind the selection of the bass alignment? Because it's it's inspired, from what I understand, by the bass alignment on the other speakers, but you don't see too many, even large speakers, that have that many bass drivers and this sort of a bass alignment these days.
Right.
It's a bit of a different approach.
So, let's cast our minds back to the point where in fact, I was still at B&W, and I had determined that I wanted to get into studio monitor design. And in the end, it was clear that at the time it was not relevant to the core business of the company. So that was the point at which I decided to leave and start embark on a program of development for my own enlightenment, really. And I came up with what are now the D50 and the D26, so the 50mm upper mid driver and the D26 GTT. And the core of the design was to create a driver that could produce 120 decibels or thereabouts, which is a sort of peak level that you might expect in a recording studio. The vivid range that we've had up to this point, whilst it's true that the mid and high drivers could possibly peak at that level, the whole system cannot. And the limiting factor is always the bass section. Quite simply, they have to move a certain amount to move that amount of air. So when it came to Moya, I resurrected that target of 120 decibels, and if you work your way down the range of drivers, that determines the position of the crossover points. But the very last question is, how many bass drivers am I going to need to keep up with that peak level of 120 decibels? And if you look at the peak excursion point, which is about 30 hertz, the C225 can move 12.5 millimeters peak. How many do you need to make 120 dB? And the answer is 8. So that's why we have 4 pairs of bass drivers.
Yeah.
And a hidden advantage of having, going for a large number of smaller drivers like that is that you get lots of voice coil area, so that the voice coils never get warm. So you get very low power compression, which I think is one of the effects that everyone has noticed, is that you can slam the loudspeakers with a whole bunch of power and they just deliver. They don't shrink back. They just go for it.
Yeah, that's something I notice with speakers that tend to have, that number of bass drivers. And I mean, I know from my time mixing live sound, it's like there is nothing quite like having that many fairly large drivers moving. And in hi-fi, especially where we're somewhat space limited depending on our living situation, we get used to hearing bass compression at 50 or even 60 hertz from relatively small speakers, and sometimes mistake that sort of upper mid or mid bass punchiness for being a sense of bass. With Moya, I get more the impression of truly that large, speaker array or that large line array style sound where it goes all the way down cleanly, and when the mid bass is punchy on a recording, it's punchy, but you can also play. I think Mark Phillips played like the Dune soundtrack and some of the Hans Zimmer stuff that has lots of 30 hertz rumble in it. It's there too, and it doesn't have that compression. Absolutely. It's a little, you have to kind of get used to it at first, because, I listen to like a lot of smaller two-ways and things like that, and you're like, oh yes, this is what true extended low end sounds like. Right. It's always kind of fun.
I mean, you alluded to the professional side, and of course I did spend the last 20 years also with the foot in the professional field, and I have learnt some tricks from that, and a part of the modularity, modular approach of Moya is the lessons that I've learnt from Pro Audio.
I find it interesting you mentioned Pro, and there's you have a dome mid-range, which is something that I have seen in some of my favorite studio monitors like ATC and the Neumanns from Sennheiser, which were old K&H and things like that. What attracted you to the dome more than some of the more typical large cone?
Right.
Style?
Well, of course, there again we're going back to it's my history of developing the Nautilus in the first place, where the realization that the limitation of the sounds of so many loudspeakers is the use of a cone for the mid-range, a cone which is made of relatively low modulus material and is beginning to actually break up in the mid-range, and the realization that breakup, that coloration, is just, it becomes a characteristic sound, and we're trying to produce a loudspeaker which adds no color. The idea, as I said, is that it provides a transparent window onto the original performance, and realizing that a dome, it was quite possible to produce a dome driver which would behave perfectly, absolutely perfectly, within its passband. that was in a sense the crucial step, the understanding that that's the way to go, that cones really have a fundamental limitation, well, at least floppy cones.
That's my new band name, Floppy Cones.
Floppy cones.
Yeah, sorry. I'll just toss a little thing like that into the conversation. Yes, floppy cones. It is. I would say it's the Achilles heel of still a great many loudspeakers. The downside, of course, is that if you go the mid-range dome route, it does end up being a four-way system. Of course, we ourselves have developed a driver now, the C100 driver, which is in fact perfectly capable of going up to 10 kilohertz. And we do use it as a mid-range, and it doesn't break up. The limiting factor with doing that sort of thing is that the polar response starts to narrow a bit, but you can actually use it to your advantage, and it provides a controlled dispersion, and in fact it is a perfectly acceptable way forward. But you have to take other corrective actions.
I get the impression, just from talking the last couple of days and seeing a little bit of how you work, that you do a lot of quantitative measurements, and
yes,
there's a lot of sort of engineering work that goes in before a product is ever listened to or heard. How does that dovetail into, or how does that align with your subjective process? What does that look like? How do you transition between the two? What are you listening for when you do start to listen? At what point are you ready to listen?
We're an engineering-led company. I've said it so many times. Inevitably, people look at our stuff and think, oh, quirky design. It's a design-led company. We are not. We're absolutely an engineering-led company. And thankfully, what I have found is if I follow my engineering instincts, like getting rid of coloration in band, reflection, resonance, all those things, that actually the subjective results just follows. Again, it was stuff that we concluded some time ago. If you take care of all the coloration, then it tends to just work. There are many aspects to taking care of the coloration, the shape of the cabinet, the exponential tube, But one of the questions people often ask is, how do you voice your loudspeakers? We don't. We aim for a smooth response, maybe a little bit of a downward tilt, and that's just a subjective, it's a matter of taste, actually. But we don't. I think voicing. My opinion on voicing is that if you have a hilly response, then the way in which the ear picks up the peaks in output, when you've got an actual peak in the response, and the way in which you deal with that, and the way in which you balance the things, of course, it will depend on the sort of music you play then, because if you play music that happens to have a lot of material where you tend to have a peak, then you're going to want to pull that back, and therefore that loudspeaker will sound right with that sort of music. That to me isn't the right approach. We try to produce a loudspeaker which delivers everything evenly, and then it's a pretty neutral, a neutral window.
Nice. When do you know when your baby is ready to go out into the world?
We listen. We that's the thing. In the end, we're not. All the engineering measurements and stuff. Of course, we do all that. But at the end of the day, we take it home and just stick it in the room and not even. Obviously, we'll sit and listen. We'll do some sitting and listening. But one of the things I always talk about is the other room test. You've got to be able to stand in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, listening to piano music in the listening room, and it sounds like there's a pianist in there. It's a really important part of the test. So we live with the product, and sometimes we'll make adjustments. Not actually all that often. I'm glad to say that if we do all our preparatory work diligently, usually they come out pretty well.
Yeah. That's been my experience talking to some of the designers that I think I respect the most in the industry. Is they're like, I have a pretty clear vision of the engineering things that I want to address in this product, and it's 98% done outside of a few production level tweaks, or maybe a part needs to be changed or a little value here or there. But it's 98% there once we first birthed the prototypes and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, experience counts for a fair old bit.
Of course, yeah. Bill, I'm curious to know, like, what? How long have you had the Moyas that you have here now?
About 3 months, but I was gone for a couple of weeks in July, a couple of weeks in August. So I say that I have about 2 months on them. Okay. So yeah, they're really starting to get broken in now, and now starting to really do some demos, which I won't play a cold speaker or an unbroken in speaker or amplifier DAC or anything else for someone until it's where it needs to be. We don't just plug it in, and we believe in getting things right before we put it out there.
Do you feel like they've settled pretty well at this point?
They have settled, absolutely. Yeah, there was, for a couple of weeks, they never sounded bad. No Vivid to me has ever sounded bad. And they just, they start out good, and then they just grow to their peak.
It's a very interesting point, because I noticed that as well. Like, having heard some with not too many hours on them, it was like, it was strong out of the box.
Yeah.
It was,
we do play music through all our loudspeakers. If we can, we leave them running over the weekend, so they are a little bit broken.
Well, that's 48 hours. You
Yeah.
need 8 weeks minimum.
Yeah.
But at least you can discover if there's any anomalies or anything crazy.
Most importantly, it's there to pick up glaring,
QC or
bits dropping off.
Yeah, bits dropping off.
Or floppy cones.
Floppy cones. But Joe earlier asked me, frankly, what do you think of the sound of these loudspeakers? And I said, Joe, they're better than I've ever heard them. And that's, absolutely true. But obviously it's a combination of Bill's incredible listening room and the ancillary equipment and Joe's cables. But really, this pair of speakers have had the longest time to settle down and become what they are.
Yeah.
So,
How did you deal with, this is also a much bigger speaker than you've made in the Vivid lineup previously. Were there specific challenges associated with that from a production standpoint or mechanical standpoint that were novel, or?
Well, my production engineer, John in South Africa, would be the one who has found the biggest array of challenges associated with this loudspeaker. I mean, not least is the fact that you're putting 4 identical boxes on top of each other, and therefore
then
the match.
Baffle,
and then but so the match between all these surfaces, it's essential that they do match, and making that work has been an extra challenge. We've done a lot of learning along the way. There's no question that Bill's pair is better than our pair.
Well, I would think from John's perspective, he's making 5 pairs of speakers every time he makes a pair of Moyas.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's and what do they ship in 11 crates?
10. No, but it was also I learnt by observing, or at least hearing the tale of a UK reviewer getting. I think it's also roughly £800 US-made, very famous US-made loudspeaker up a spiral staircase. Oh. And when he recounted the tale of these, because obviously at that weight you have to have beefy guys to support the thing. So these 3 beefy guys and this £800 loudspeaker up a spiral staircase. And I mean, it sounded, yes, it was a comedy. It was something from Laurel and Hardy, actually. But I thought, no. We won't do that.
No. Yeah, so I really do appreciate the it's all right. So you're moving 10 pieces, but
at least you can do it.
Yeah, you can do it.
Nobody wants to eat a whole steak without a fork and a knife.
This is true.
Cut it up.
I haven't heard this analogy before.
But we get where you come from.
I might use it and credit you, Grover.
Yeah, nobody wants to grab a tomahawk with their, well, maybe some of the paleo diet people do, but can you imagine grabbing a whole tomahawk, like 24 ounce, and eating it with your hands? No, that'd be preposterous.
Yeah.
The vivid Moya, the tomahawk of the loudspeaker world.
Well, this is what it's like here. I mean, it's nothing but fun and jokes and, but some serious listening as well. And, you know, just going back to where we started, and we'll wrap this up, but just the musical education that you gave us today. I've always believed that music is nothing but a journey, and me being a fan of classical music, there's so many subgenres within the genres, and then all the different roads that you can take, and you know, and then you're playing things that people that I didn't know were disciples of the Second Viennese School and studied under Schoenberg, and I mean, it's like, we
didn't even get to the Albenberg, Schoenberg, Stravinsky part of the program.
I like that music. You know, when when I was decided I was going to get into classical music way back when, I did a year of big symphonic things. I mean, in my head, I went to those concerts, this is what I played, and decided I liked that. Then I did, a year of small soloist, and then, a year of leader, and a year of chamber, and a year of atonal, and I would dedicate. I would, at the beginning of the year, this is what I'm going to dig into this year.
It's very impressive, Bill.
It is, actually,
Most people who are not necessarily, and even classical music fans, I would say, who are not really trained, and even a lot of the people I went to school with, like, a lot of kids went into Theory 4 and were like, I'm going to study this Schoenberg garbage. Like, I hate this stuff. And thankfully, the teachers were, if you have a great teacher, you come out loving it. But I would say that's a very open-minded approach to
that's what
exploring.
I did.
Some of the materials quite challenging.
For sure.
I actually like the atonal stuff. There's some stuff, you can't like everything. And there's stuff I don't like, but the atonal stuff I like.
Yeah, but you do have to work at it, and that's the impressive
I had
thing.
great Verklauter Nacht and Albenberg recordings queued up that we haven't played yet.
Berg is my favorite. So
Berg's my favorite.
Yeah, is that right?
Fantastic. Oh yeah.
Well, we need to get in there and do that.
Yeah, we do.
You're going to have to jump in an Uber here pretty soon.
Yeah,
So listen, thank you so much for
having me,
attending and joining us and doing this video with us. It's been very enlightening.
Check out this guy's shop and this guy's speakers. They're awesome human beings. Can't say enough nice things.
Grover,
It was
it's
lovely
such a
to meet
pleasure.
you, Laurence. Likewise.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.